exhibition Itchin and Scratchin at Spark Island, which is presented in partnership with Nottingham Contemporary. So Itchin and Scratchin includes new and existing paintings and works on paper that capture the energy of the dimly lit dance halls of 1980s London and the present-day open-air clubs of Jamaica. Unfortunately, our gallery is now closed until at least the 2nd of December because of the current lockdown measures, but we really hope to be able to reopen before the show ends on the 17th of January. So I strongly encourage you all to visit safely in the flesh if you can. So a bit of housekeeping before we begin. Our public programme seeks to create an environment for critical and open-minded discussion. Although interaction with speakers is limited, we strongly encourage use of the chat function available through YouTube Live to write any questions you may have through the event. We'll be fielding these around the 45-minute mark, and please also note that the live stream and the chat are being recorded. A reminder that any aggressive, discriminatory or intolerant comments will be removed by our chat moderators in keeping with our aims to create a respectful and generative environment for all involved. And so without further delay, I'd like to introduce this evening's speakers. So Denzil Forrester lives and works in Truro. He graduated from the Central School of Art in London in 1979 and the Royal College of Art also in London in 1983. He was awarded a scholarship by the British School in Rome from 1983 to 85 and a Harkness Fellowship in New York from 1986 to 88. He's recently presented solo exhibitions at Stephen Friedman Gallery and Tramps in London, the Jackson Foundation in St. Just and White Columns in New York, all of which were curated by Peter Doig and Matthew Higgs. He's also recently been included in group shows at Tate Britain and Somerset House in London, as well as Metro Pictures in New York. Forrester's newly commissioned work, Brixton Blue, which is a reinterpretation of his seminal work, Three Wicked Men from 1982, is currently on view at Brixton Underground Station in South London until spring 2021. Eddie Chambers was born in Wolverhampton. He gained his PhD from Goldsmiths College, University of London in 1988 for his study of press and other responses to the work of a new generation of Black artists in Britain active during the 1980s. Following periods of teaching at Emory University in Atlanta, he joined the Department of Art and Art History at the University of Texas at Austin in January 2010, where he is now professor, teaching classes and seminars related to the art history of the African diaspora. He's guest edited several issues of journals, namely Critical Interventions, NKA Journal of Contemporary African Arts, and the International Review of African American Art. His peer-reviewed texts have appeared in journals such as Small Axe, a Caribbean Journal of Criticism, Slavery and Abolition, a Journal of Slave and Post-Slave Studies, and Visual Culture in Britain. His books include Things Don't Change, The Cultural Politics of Recent Black Artists in Britain, Black Artists in British Art, A History Since the 1950s, and Roots and Culture, Cultural Politics in the Making of Black Britain. He's the editor of a recently published 40-essay volume, The Rutledge Companion to African American Art History, and his forthcoming book is World is Africa, Writings on Diaspora Art, which brings together a range of texts over the past 2 decades. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Denzil and Eddie to begin their conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you very much for that, for those words of introduction. This is actually the first time Denzil and I have been in this kind of setup, so it's a great opportunity for me to ask Denzil a number of questions that I look forward to hearing his answers. Denzil and I have known each other for a long time, going back to the 1980s, and we've worked on several exhibitions over the years. But as I say, this is a privileged moment. This is a moment of privilege for me to be in conversation with Denzil. I wanted to start, Denzil. I wanted to ask you. I wanted to go back in time a little bit. In fact, say a little bit. That's actually 30 years. And the first major exhibition of your work that I saw was Dub Transition at Harris Museum, Preston, and then touring to Usher Gallery, Lincoln, and Lane Art Gallery, Newcastle. So this is the first opportunity that I had, and I think first opportunity by that a number of people had to see a large body of your work. And I believe Emma Anderson was probably the one who created it or brought it.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to start, Denzel, by just asking you how that exhibition came about. To me, it still stands as a kind of a towering or very important exhibition of your work. But just before you respond to and give us some information or background about Dub Transition, I just wanted to say, I should have said earlier that the images of Itching and Scratching that Spike Arden that shared with me that show this exhibition that's very, very beautifully installed. It looks wonderful, and I wonder if we could share with the audience maybe a couple of installation views of it, just so they can get a sense of it the same way as I've got a sense of it through a computer screen. I do hope to have the opportunity to see the exhibition in person, because it looks like a beautifully curated and beautifully installed body of work. Is it possible for us to maybe the audience is seeing the audience is seeing the images. I'm not seeing them, but perhaps they're being shared. Okay, great. So they are seeing them. Thanks.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Okay, thank you. Great. Yeah. So I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about Dub Transition, how the exhibition came about, and what for you was significant about the exhibition.
Yeah, the exhibition came about because I came back from Rome, '85. And I sent a painting I did called Domino Hunters to the Whitechapel Open. I think it must be 86, 87. Nicholas Cerruta was the director then. And Jenny Lomax saw my painting of Domino Hunters at the Whitechapel Open. Because Whitechapel Open was a big exhibition then of mainly artists from the East End, because I lived in Hackney, of course. And Jenny Lomax really liked the Domino Hunters. And so she came to see the rest of my work, because I had a studio at Islington Arts Factory at the time, Holloway Road, just off Holloway Road. And then that's how the exhibition came about. She really liked the exhibition, the painting Domino Hunters, and liked the rest of my paintings. And she was the one who instigated the exhibition. And that's how it came about, which was, and I think she got John Lyons to write the catalogue. And it was great, because it was the only time I was seeing most of my paintings together in one big space. Yeah. So that's how it came about.
Yes, well, of course, the catalogue for it is now a rarity, but
yeah, I know.
containing that important essay by John Lyons, so yeah. It's a very kind of a very important early manifestation of the span of your work up to that point up to that point in time.
Yeah, in fact, it went to Nottingham as well, in the Angel Row. It went to Angel Row. It used to be a big modern library. It was a brand new space. So that was another venue it went to, which was quite interesting at the time.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned about Jenny Lomax and the Whitechapel, because of course in that late '80s period it was after From Two Worlds, because From Two Worlds was an exhibition in '86 that you showed alongside a number of other artists.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. It probably was a bit of all those combination. The Whitechapel Open, From Two Worlds, and like you said, Jenny Lomax was director then, I think. I think she was just taking over, because she came to Islington Arts Factory to see most of my work. And they chose, I think, Blue Tent for exhibiting in Two Worlds. painting called Blue Tent.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Denzel. Clearly, we're talking about 4 decades of painting now.
It's very long. Another world.
Yeah, 4 decades of painting. I remember when I created that show of your work in Bristol in 2002. It was 2 decades of painting, but obviously since then we've doubled the decades to 40
well, it
years.
was 2002, wasn't it? I've got the catalogue here.
Yeah,
2002.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I wanted to ask you, Denzel, is something that is an important mainstay, if you like, of your practice over this period of time, is your 30 years, an incredible period of time, 30 years at Morley College, you know, from the mid-80s until 2016 or thereabouts. And of course, you had that exhibition, Lifeline, I believe it was called Lifeline, which was a kind of a celebration of your work with students
at Morley.
Yeah, students at Morley, and also the ways in which your own work had evolved over that 30-year period. So I wonder if you might share with us some of your reflections on how significant Morley College was in your evolution to 2016 as an artist.
Well, the great thing about the job at Morley was given to me when I was at the Royal College, when I finished my MA at the Royal College. And I couldn't do it because I had the Rome Fellowship. So I went to Rome, had a brilliant time painting in Rome for 2 years, came back in 85. And the head of painting, this guy called John Flemings, he's passed away about 5-6 years ago. But he was really keen about giving me the job. So this job was, he still offered it to me. So I took it on. I didn't really want to teach adults. I used to teach young people, after school when I was at art school. So I was used to teaching from quite a young age, but not so much adults. So it was a new experience. So I started the job in 85 and I wasn't sure about it, teaching at Morley. And of course, I've just finished. The trouble is, because if you just finish a fellowship like the Rome Fellowship, which is like, I was painting there intensely for 2 years. I did a lot of major paintings there, Domino Hunters, Carnival Dub, Blue Tent, Dub Strobe, you name it. I did a lot of exciting paintings in Rome. So I wanted to carry on. I didn't want to stop. I'm teaching. I was only teaching one day when I started, which was Thursday, but it was from 10 a.m. till 9 p.m. So I did a day class and the evening class. And I realized I had to do something about this. I couldn't put up with it. So I applied for the Harkness Fellowship. And I was successful. Went to New York for 2 years, 86 to 88. And I came back in 88. And the college still had the job for me. So I thought, flipping hell, I must do this job. But the beauty about going to America, going to New York helped me a lot because I found that the book called The Natural Way to Draw by Kimon Nicolaides. I started reading this. It's a book on drawing. Found it in Astor Place in a second-hand book I bought, and I really loved the book because the book was explaining to me basically about the drawings I was doing in the nightclub. I had an idea what the drawings were about, but explaining it verbally was very difficult. But reading this book helped me a lot to talk about art, particularly to students, because when you have a class, you got to speak to people about drawing. You got to tell them, basic things about drawing. And even though you're good at drawing, verbalizing it is very difficult. But finding that book was a gem because that helped me a lot, because I was doing exactly what Kimon Nicolaides were talking about in the book. So when I came back in 88, I structured my class very differently. So I had a drawing program for new students for at least the term, which is like 10, 12 weeks. And I was quite strict about it because most adults who come to adult education, they want to start painting straight away, but the drawing skills are so poor. They need a good dose of drawing. So I managed to get most people to do at least 6 or 7 weeks of it. And it's good. If they go through the whole program, it means that they will stay with me. And, because they understand the importance of this way of working. So it was good. That helped me to structure myself at Morley. And then I got another day. After about 3 or 4 years, John Clemens gave me another day's work. So I had just over 2.5 days working there. But, I mean, I got used to it and enjoyed doing it because I found a way of talking to students about, drawing and painting. Whereas before, when I just started the job, I didn't have that skill. And that book helped me a lot. And it made my life a lot simpler because I was doing all that stuff myself, spontaneously, emotionally. Explaining it to people verbally, it's very, very difficult. When you have a class of 20 people and they're all different ages from 18 to basically 90, and then you have to break the different, some people might be painting, some people might be drawing. But once after about 2 or 3 years, I really got used to it and really liked doing it. And of course, if you're a painter, like me doing large scale paintings, you got to have that type of job because the paintings weren't selling. My painting was not selling. I had a studio in Islington, the Arts Factory, which my partner's parents-in-law started. The rent wasn't that expensive, which was good, and I had good storage, which helped to protect my painting. So I was working about 2-3 days a week, which was good, which was very good for me, I reckon. So that helped me a lot to structure my life in terms of the teaching side and the painting side. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Denzel. I remember visiting your studio so often, and it was wonderful that you had all that storage and all that space to work over such a protracted period of time.
I was very lucky because of Philippa's parents. They started the Islington Arts Factory. It's a massive church on Camden Road, Holloway Road, Parkhurst Road, sorry. And because Philippa's dad painted and Philippa's mom did contemporary dance, I was lucky to be involved in that family because they helped me a lot when I left the Royal College. Because when I left the Royal College, I had lots of big paintings, like Three Wicked Men, that massive crocodile painting I did. I had a lot of big nightclub paintings, and I needed lots of storage. So being involved with Islington Arts Factory at the very beginning was really my savior, I think, because otherwise I don't think those paintings would have lasted very well.
Yeah. No, I'm sure that's the case. I'm sure that's the case. But as I say, alongside this wonderful studio space, you did have the ability to store these paintings, and of course, we have to be very thankful that you had access to those spaces. I wanted to move on, Denzel. I wanted to ask you something that I know you have spoken about in the past, but I wanted to raise this matter again, and that is the ways in which you visualize the loss of life of Winston Rose, somebody with whom you were kind of acquainted, or you kind of, your paths crossed, and subsequent to your paths crossing, you learned of his unfortunate passing. Now, I suppose that within this kind of what we might possibly call the kind of post-George Floyd moment, we have this accentuated understanding of police violence meted out to Black people, or the ways in which Black people are on the receiving end of police violence. We have these this sentiment being increasingly recognised on both sides of the Atlantic. Of course, black people in Britain have a prolonged history of being on the receiving end of police violence. But I'm very interested in your paintings of Winston Rose, because it seems you made these early paintings, A Police in Van, Funeral of Winston Rose in the early 80s, and then five years later or thereabouts. I mean, you've already made mention of Blue Jay. Towards 87 or thereabouts, you make Blue Jay, and I noticed that you still return to this visualizing of the stressful, traumatic circumstances under which Winston Rose lost his life, and you made a drawing maybe about 6 years ago, The Rose, pencil and charcoal. So you're revisiting these issues. So I mean. It might be a question that has obvious answers, but I'm very interested to know more about why you feel compelled to return to visualizing the passing of Winston Rose's life in these most fascinating ways. I mean, these extraordinary paintings. I mean, they're all different from each other. Police in Van is different from Funeral of Winston Rose is very different from Blue Jay. Very different from The Rose. So each time you return to the subject, it's a different manifestation.
Yeah. Well, a lot of those paintings the early paintings were made in a really high-pitched emotional state when I was at the Royal College. The major ones, like Dedo, Three Wicked Men. But what I didn't realize, that I did lots of versions of Three Wicked Men. I didn't actually consciously realize it till Peter and Matthew came to see me in 2016 and started going through my paintings. I realized I had done about 4 or 5 major paintings about, the death of Winston Rose. I mean, there's a burial, but there was a lot of police ones. And because I was doing them emotionally, I didn't actually consciously think I'm doing another painting to do with Winston Rose. And the way I work, I like working with feelings and stuff that I know about. So because I wrote the thesis about Winston Rose, I went to the inquest in Waltham Forest Magistrate Court for about a week and wrote the thesis. I knew a lot about the detail about how he died because I didn't want to make anything up. And I was doing a big painting. The burial, the funeral of Winston Rose came about because I wasn't doing a burial painting of Winston. I was doing a nightclub painting, basically to do with Jashaka and the crew. And I just accidentally thought, why don't I just stick Winston Rose, take out Jashaka, and stick the coffin in to start. And then that's how the whole thing started. And then because I was doing all those spontaneous drawings in the nightclubs, I wanted to make drawings about Winston Rose like that. Because I was making it up. I wasn't going to a place like I did with the nightclub and seeing people and drawing them. So I thought I'll stretch some big elephant-sized paper, basically about 1 meter. And that's how I did the original Three Wicked Men and Dedo. I did them in a day. I stretched this big paper and I thought I have to do this painting the same way I make the drawings in the nightclub, in a more gestural, movement, action, expression, what I feel. And so that came about. But then I did all these paintings about Winston Rose, like you were saying. And then in 2016, I realized I've made much more paintings about him that I was consciously aware of. Because the thing is, if you finish a painting, I like to keep about 2 or 3 paintings on the go. Because I was working at, say, when I was at college, Royal College or Rome, in London, I had about 3 spaces to work. So yeah, I was at Royal College. I was at Culverston. Culverston is a place in Dalston, Hackney, where I started working when I was like 17, 16. So before I went to art school. And I left that place in the 90s. So I must have been in my 50s when I left Culverston. So I used to have at least 3 paintings on the go. And so so you're making all these paintings, and as soon as you finish one, you're ready to start another one. So you just put the paintings away and you're ready to go to another one. But the beautiful thing about Peter and Matthew coming to see me in 2016 to see basically about 40 years of my work, I realized that I've done so much paintings about police, police brutality, basically. So then London Underground approached me to do something for Brixton Station, which I ignored because I never did commission. But Matthew Higgs, the guy who runs White Columns in New York, where I had my exhibition, asked me to do it. Matthew suggested I should do this. I should do something for Brixton. So I started going back and looking at all the paintings I've done. I was thinking, well, what's the best painting? What's the painting that will really suit Brixton? And I keep thinking about Three Wicked Men. I asked Philippa, my partner. She keeps saying Three Wicked Men as well. So I thought, well, I've done Three Wicked Men. It's at the Tate. Peter's bought it for the Tate. And I've done about at least 4 or 5 paintings like that already in that similar kind of police situation. So I thought, well, I've done so many, I might as well do another one for Brixton. And that's how that came. That drawing that you saw in the police van, because I did that just before I retired at Morley as well. So somehow it's difficult to explain how these things are happening inside of you. You sometimes, like you see George Floyd, you see horrible things happening to people from, black people mainly. You see it on the television, you see it on whatever, the papers and stuff. And you sort of find yourself drawn to go back to that stuff again, and it's kind of painful sometimes doing it, but, what could you do? And I think that's why I keep being drawn back to that. And it's interesting that the Blue Jay, the Brixton painting, were only done a year before George Floyd thing. And so that's, but I think it's probably, if I didn't know Winston Rose, because we lived in the same house for 5 years in Hackney, and if I didn't have that personal experience about someone like that, it probably would have been very difficult for me to make those type of paintings. But I think it's your experience of, I was arrested by the police once from doing a drawing on Dalston's of a big billboard when they saw what's a billboard. But my experience wasn't that. They would treat me horrible and stuff, and I was charged for insulting language and stuff. And because I was a student, the student union came and spoke on my behalf. The head of Central came and spoke on my behalf. But I was still charged, and I was thinking, look, I'm a student. I'm doing a BA. They knew I was, but I was still charged. And I was thinking to myself, God, just imagine if I was someone like not involved in art or just a guy on the street. You could really be in a bad state if you take these things seriously, which, I do take it seriously, but the worst thing you can do is take it too seriously that it destroys your life. You have to make something positive of it. And I think making paintings, I think, has helped me to sort it out. Yeah.
Right. Great. Thank you for giving us so much information there. It really deepens our appreciation of the narratives that we can see in these paintings. Of course, it's very important for us to appreciate that it's not reportage in these paintings. These are wonderfully kind of open narratives in these paintings. There are aspects of them that perhaps run counter to the dominant narrative of death and life draining away from this unfortunate person. So these are they are wonderful paintings in so many respects. Linked to that, perhaps, but perhaps as a tangential question I'd like to ask, and this is about your relationship with Linton Kwesi Johnson. Because in the early 90s, when he releases his collection of poems called Things and Times, one of your works, At the Control, from which I think you must have done when you were at the Royal College. I think it dates from 81.
So yeah, that was my first painting at the Royal College.
Okay. So this is on the cover of Things and Times, and then of course all these years later, nearly 2 decades later, but I suppose really it's about 17 or so years later. You have Linton Kwesi Johnson reading his poems at at your show at the Jackson Foundation.
The Jackson Foundation.
St. Just. So, this speaks of a kind of an evolving and ongoing relationship. Perhaps we can frame it in larger terms, in terms of relationship between Linton Kwesi Johnson's poetry, the ways in which it's characterized as dub poetry. I know he resists that label himself, but there's a connection between dub music, poetry, and the visual arts as manifest in your work. And Linton Kwesi Johnson clearly recognizes this as well. So I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about that relationship and how you came to bring him into this wonderful opening at St. Just at Jackson Foundation in 2018.
Well, it almost didn't happen because the invitation to Linton went very well. But basically, I asked Peter and Matthew to curate the show. And Matthew loves music. He's got such a big collection of records and stuff. And he is really keen about Linton. He's really loved Linton, what Linton does. And he was desperate to get Linton involved. That's Matthew Higgs. And of course, I always wanted to meet Linton myself. I've been to a lot of private views at, I think, the October Gallery, and Linton is always there, and I usually say hello and stuff. And of course, like his poems and everything. But we never did anything together except he chose my at the control for his book Things and Time. So when Matthew put the idea to me, I was so excited about it. But we didn't have a contact for Linton. But Anne Womesley, who is a very close friend to Linton, gave me his contact. Anne Womesley, of course, a lovely woman. And I wrote to Linton, and Linton agreed to read his poems, which was, we were all so excited about it. And it was great that, because it was the first time having someone like that, and the relationship between like his poems and the paintings, and it was great because some of the paintings that were shown at Kurt Jackson's, there was one of Josh Shaka, which was done in basically 81 or 80, probably 81, I think. And Domino Hunters was done in Rome, which was 85, 86. So a lot of the paintings were around the time Linton was doing Things and Time. So because half the paintings were new, but half the paintings were from the 80s. So it really connected well. And the beautiful thing, I mean, you were there, Eddie, it was the amazing thing about when Linton started reading. I thought he was going to read about 2 or 3 poems. He must have read about 9. So that was so exciting. I think to have something like that happen in St. Just, in Kurt Jackson's, the Jackson's Gallery, I think it was a very magical experience, I think. And I really had fun. That was a special private view, that was, I think, very special. Yeah. And
Yes, yes, it
thanks
certainly
to
was.
Linton.
Yes, it certainly was. Thank you, thank you, Denzel.
Mm.
You know, I wanted to bring us around to Itching and Scratching at Spike Island, um, um, but by way of that, I wanted to just offer this articulation of your paintings and the ways in which the you oftentimes seek to visualize music. The visualizing of music is a key way in which we might possibly understand your painting. But alongside that, there's also visualizing dance. So, you know, these are things which, in some respects, it's challenging to visualize music.
Yeah,
You know, it's challenging to visualize dance, but these are things that your paintings kind of so wonderfully succeed in. And I've always been struck by the references to music, reggae music. You have a painting. Sorry, a number of your paintings have titles of Bob Marley records, references to Trenchtown, references to Catch a Fire. There's a painting, Catch a Fire, which I'd like to mention. I'd like to come on to momentarily, but it's clear that the relationship between your paintings and music is very strong, and it's one that is evolving and growing. So I wanted to ask you, just if you could just say a little bit about Itching and Scratching as a title, and how you regard this latest manifestation of your work. It's a wonderful opportunity to see work over the past few years. Hopefully, those of us who are lucky enough or fortunate enough or able to will get to see the exhibition if current challenges notwithstanding. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about Itching and Scratching.
Yeah, Itching and Scratching came about because mainly because of the exhibition in St. Just again. A tutor from Goldsmiths, Julian Henriquez, he's a professor at Goldsmiths, which I knew from the 80s. He used to be, I think he used to help do a program called Black and Black. So I knew him from the 80s, and he was interested in my work. So he suddenly turned up at my exhibition in St. Just. I haven't seen him for about 35 years. And he was so excited about the show, really loved the show. He said to me, I'm going to apply for a fellowship so we can go to Kingston and you can draw like you used to in Hackney in the 80s. So I thought, I can't see that happen. I couldn't believe it was going to happen. So anyway, Julian applied for the fellowship, for the grant, so that we can go to Kingston. So we went to Kingston in 2019, February. And of course, February is the time to go to Kingston. It's all the major superstars, Dennis Brown, Bob Marley. So there's parties everywhere, you know. And I've never been to Kingston, although most of my paintings are about reggae, dub music, mainly Jamaican music. And so I was quite excited. I was looking forward to it. Anyway, we got to Kingston, and it's an amazing place. And the first nightclub we went to was the Kingston Dub Club, which is up in the hills, just outside Kingston, right next to Bob Marley's original home, original house. And the music in the Kingston Dub Club is very similar to the music in the 80s. So it's more old reggae, but really, good. And it's all in the open air. Now, I hadn't drawn like this for over 20 years, probably 25 years, like in the nightclub with my A1 paper. Plus, I had a film crew of about 5 guys filming me, making the drawings. so it was, I was put on the spot basically. So I had to throw myself into this whole. I didn't actually realize it was going to be such difficult work. The first night, the great thing is about the clubs, they were in the open air. So they were not inside buildings, they were outside. So you kept cool. but it was still quite warm. Um, so I mean, I, I mean, I didn't pretend or anything. I just draw like I used to draw back in the 80s. The length of a record, 3 or 4 minutes, put it away and start another one. So the first one was quite difficult to get into. After the second time, the next nightclub we went to, I got into it a lot better, and I started enjoying it. But it took quite a while because it was basically a working holiday because they wanted film you going into the nightclub, joining the nightclub, and then going away from the nightclub. And one of the drawings I did in one of the clubs in Kingston were very similar to a drawing I did at the All Nations Club in Hackney in 1985 when I was in Rome. Because when I was in Rome, I used to come back for Christmas and go to all the nightclubs for 2 weeks and then draw and take the drawings back to Rome and make paintings. All Nations used to be one of the oldest black clubs in the country, massive Victorian building in off May Street. But I didn't used to go to it because it was more of a combination of all different types of black music, so R&B, disco, reggae, everything. I was really into the heavy dub, jashaka. But I went to it because my sister had a job there, so I could get in free and stuff like that. And I find myself making this drawing for about an hour, which I never do. That's dub strobe, the drawing called dub strobe. So in Kingston, I find myself doing the same thing at one of these nightclubs I went to. I did this drawing for about half an hour, not my usual 3 minutes, because it was a very, there was endless people and they were doing very frenetic, sort of, they were young and, full of energy and, just the energy and movement and expression and stuff they were doing. After 3 minutes, you could see they were exhausted. So I had to try and sort of go with that feeling and see what happened. And I took the drawing back to my flat and looked at it the next day, and I realized it was very similar to Dub Strobe. That's the drawing I was doing in Kingston. So what I did with the drawing, because I was still in the feeling of the nightclub the day after, I still had the feeling of the dancers and the music and everything. I thought I'll keep it going a bit. So I worked on the drawing, which I don't usually do. So I worked on this drawing for about another hour. And I got excited about it. So when I came back to Cornwall, um, I did this drawing. I really liked the drawing I did for well, that's why I call it itching. The reason I called it itching and scratching because there were so many figures in these paintings doing lots of kind of movement, which reminds me of someone itching and scratching their body. So I did two paintings of itching and scratching, two big paintings, which was of course in the touring show, and one was in Freeze, uh, Freeze London, which was about October, and that's how the I did the painting. And then if I have problems choosing the title, what I'll do, I'll get Philippa to come and have a look at it. And Philippa came and have a look at it. I did this painting for about 6 weeks. It usually takes me about 6 weeks to do a painting. And because there were so many little bits and pieces, basically endless bloody figures all over these paintings, it was a lot of work. But the beauty about making a painting immediately after the event, immediately after the event in the nightclub, the feeling is still in with you, the energy is still in you, with you, and you have to try and get it out. So I spent about 6 weeks making this painting, and then I thought I've exhausted myself. I can't do anymore. So Philippa came in and had a look. And she said, what do you think? And she said, itching and scratching. And that's how the title came about. And it really worked with the painting.
Yeah, well, so Denzel, you were saying?
No, the nice thing about going to Kingston, it really revived, because when I moved to Cornwall, I didn't actually sure what I was going to paint. And I started paint. That's where from trench down to from Porth down to trench down, from trench down to Porth down came about because I was doing a beach painting of my local beach in Porth Town, and I didn't like it, so I put the again. I draw the three wicked men. I brought the three wicked men out and superimposed them on top of this painting, and I realized I was neglecting what I'm about, which is like basically painting interiors and figures doing, dancing, moving, things to do. And so doing something completely opposite helped me a lot to go back to myself because I was ignoring myself, what I'm about. And going to Kingston actually really helped me a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're nearly out of time. I think we have to leave some time for, rightly, we have to leave time for Q&A.
Q&A.
Yeah. But just I think we maybe just have a minute or two, literally. So let me just be as succinct as I can be. I had the opportunity. A number of us may also have had the opportunity to see Julian Henriquez's film Denzel's Dance. I saw it in January, and it's a wonderful film. I love it, and I really like the bit where you go to Edna Manley College and do the life drawing class or the drawing class. It's a great film. But I just wanted to wrap up, Denzel, by just commenting on the ways in which you've kept faith with painting. You've kept faith with painting over, say, since the late 70s to the present time. And it's wonderful to see the ways in which your work has evolved alongside aspects that have been a mainstay in some respects of your practice. And looking at your work recently, I realized that there are characters or there are figures that appear in one painting, and then years later they appear in other paintings. I mean, in some respects, it's probably months later rather than years later. But in Catch a Fire, there's a figure that I recognise who's also in Domino Hunters. There's a reveller, there's a kind of a dancing figure. So it's interesting the ways in which you kind of, these characters,
that's it,
reappear.
The figure in Domino Hunters in the bottom of No, you're right, because it is very similar to Josh Shaka. I mean, sometimes I've used Josh Shaka so many times in paintings that I've done. Yeah, I mean, it's certain images. It's like the Witch Doctor, the guy with the cat and the hat. I've used that image was in a Witch Doctor painting that the Art Skunks had bought when I was at when I finished the Royal College. And I've used that image quite a lot, probably in about 10, 15 paintings. Yeah. Some of this image stays with you, and you find yourself using them. I mean, you change them and you tweak them a lot, but it's interesting that you spot that one in Catch a Fire. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Denzel. Thank you so much, Denzel. I think maybe I'll pass over to Robert at this point.
Great. Thanks so much, Eddie and Denzel, for such a brilliant and fascinating, wide-ranging conversation. So we're going to go to questions from the audience. So there's a question from Annie, and this is, I'm interested that many of the paintings have a moment of calm in their centers, rather like in the middle of a spinning disc. Was this intentional or happenstance?
Oh, the calmness is not intentional. I mean, one of the paintings, the first painting I realized where there is a big calm. Well, the dub stroke, for instance, is a very similar constructed painting in that the mosaic ball is the only thing that's static and calm, but everything else is like frenetic and moving. But you should always try and contrast things, don't you, really? because sometimes my speakers are quieter than the people. You know, the speakers, if you look at, because I tend to like about 60% of my paintings have speakers in it. and it, I, a lot of, I didn't actually realize that till someone from Freshfields bought one of my paintings, my sewing paintings, and they reckon, oh, the people are much more, fired up and moving as opposed to the speaker. So yeah, so it's contrast, isn't it? Using calm spaces. I mean, basically, you do those things instinctively. You don't have when you're painting, you don't you you, you don't want to be too knowledgeable or think. You know, you do it instinctively. You don't have to think about it, and that's because you know when something works. When something works, is because those elements of quiet spaces, action spaces, lots of marks, less marks, because it's to do with marks, or music is the same, isn't it? I mean, dub music. You got the reverb, you got the echo, you got sometimes a dead quiet bit and a boom, a feedback and stuff. I mean, that's the exciting thing about dub music. It's just so rich in terms of how they use the space in the music. Yeah, and that's what I like. And one of my paintings I really try and do that in is Carnival Dub, because I had the speakers all over the side, and you're looking from an aerial view.
That's great.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
yes, quiet spaces are very important to make noisy spaces.
So another question from Sophie is there a particular reason why you choose to use oil paint as a medium? Because the vibrant energy of your work often seems to lend itself more to pastel than paint. So I find this choice very intriguing.
Oh, well, pastel is all right for drawing, but I couldn't work with pastel in a massive, 3 or 4 meter painting. No, I love oil paint. When I was at art school, when I studied at art school, they tried to get me to use acrylic, plastic stuff. I can't get on with acrylic at all. But when I work on paper, A1 paper, or even slightly bigger, I love pastels because pastels is, it's very immediate and you can rub it. It's similar to like charcoal, rub it in and rub it down and stuff like that. Whereas with when you use oil paint, it can get a bit messy. So a lot of the times I used to have to use a lot of terps to wipe things down. So if you work in an area for the day and next day you turn up to your studio and you think it's rubbish, you quickly have to get the white spray, so turpentine out, and literally take it off. I used to do a hell of a lot of that in the 80s and 90s. I try not to do that now because, white spirits and turpentine is very dangerous, very toxic. And I don't like wearing gloves. So I do a lot of drawing with charcoal and pencil because they're safe and, they're not so toxic. But I think it's changing the paintings because I'm doing that. Because I like to give my colors clean and sharp. I don't like the things to get muddy and messy, And I love color and I love clarity. So if it get messy, I'll have to rub it down and stuff like that. But yeah. So I think oil paint suits me because I like building on the paint. I like the wet and wet. It's, but pastels for drawing definitely because that's what I draw with at the nightclubs. I use pastels at the nightclub. Yeah. But I mean, if I had the opportunity, I would just paint at the nightclubs. A nice big canvas.
Yes, if we had to do that covertly, I guess. And another question from Terry is that you live in Cornwall now, and I know that you've incorporated the beach scenes with London street scenes. And how are you finding mixing these two very different cultures?
Oh, Cornwall is a lovely place and very inspiring to live. Sort of the history, the spiritualism. You get up in the morning and it's just lovely to go to your studio. I've got a lovely studio in the back garden. I mean, you've seen it. But I think what's influenced me, because before I came to live in Cornwall. I've been coming to Cornwall since the 70s. My first time to Cornwall was in the mid-70s. We went to one of my tutors called David Horton. He loved St. Just, and all his paintings were of St. Just. So he was my tutor at Central School of Art. So he used to take about 10 students down every year, give them a space out in the open country, and you paint for 2 weeks. And I did a lot of kind of Cézanne, Monet-style paintings at the time, which I love and helped me a lot. But, I mean, I'm not a landscape painter. I might do it, but I don't think I am. I love people, and I love nightclubs and interiors and figures, and I like using in really figures to do stuff. This is what I was saying about my beach painting. I mean, it was good for me to go out and draw people on the beach, because what drawing makes you more fluid, makes you think quicker and act quicker when you come to painting. So you don't all the time thinking and using the intellect, you work more emotionally. That's what drawing does. It helps you to be much more spontaneous and immediate. So drawing is very important. It doesn't matter what you draw, but I will always like to draw figures. That's why I like a crowded beach. It's very similar to a nightclub. And people, it's amazing how people are not still at all. They're always doing something, But I don't think I wouldn't go and paint seascape and that. But Cornwall has inspired me a lot. The light in Cornwall is so brilliant. I mean, a lot of my paintings I've done down here, they are purpley, violet, very translucent. The palette is very light, as opposed to the London palette, which is much more heavier, because, well, you cannot see daylight in London, could you really? It's all electric. So, which is very different. Yeah.
I've actually got one question that I'd like to ask just before we close, which is that one work I really love in the show at Spike Island is Dub Dance from 1992. Yeah. And like many of the works, it has this incredible energy and movement. Yeah, it feels a bit different somehow. And I remember when you came to the opening and you were talking about the fact that you were trying to capture people dancing from many different perspectives all at once.
That's it.
And I think this relates to Eddie's earlier question about visualizing music and dance. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that strategy.
Yeah, that painting I did at Colveston. Not much. Yeah, so it must have been. Colveston was quite an interesting place to paint, because it's a youth centre in Dalston, Wrigley Market. And at that time, in the 80s, there used to be a lot of dance influenced by martial art, Bruce Lee and stuff like that. Because a lot of the reggae people, they were into Bruce Lee, and they incorporated some of his movements into their dance. And they used to do things like the monkey dance. I mean, where they get down on the floor and, like dance, really, really active dancing. And in that painting, I was trying to capture those movements I expressed on the dance floor in those days. So what I did, I mean, you could see, I mean, a lot of the figures they're broken up, because trying to use sound to interrupt with the figures and not lose kind of, the rhythm and stuff like that. I mean, I did in that painting. I think there is a DJ, which is Shaka. I think he's in red, and that's one of the only paintings I've painted of Shaka where he's quite. It's more phonetic and broken up and more abstracted, that one, because I wanted to integrate the sound, the light, into a more kind of sort of like a web. So there's no separation, and I probably should go back to more of those type, some of more of that kind of language, which is kind of similar to kind of dubstrobe and itching and scratching. But in that one, I'm using that like there's about 4 or 5 figures, whereas in dubstrobe and itching and scratching, you're mainly seeing figures from the head or half the figure. you're part of the figure. And the thing about that painting you're telling me about as well, it's quite. The colors are quite. They're quite. There's a bluey green one, I think, in the middle. Yeah. And the thing is, if you actually you try and make things complicated for yourself, which is like looking at things from an aerial view as opposed to looking at things straight on, you sometimes help yourself to find that language of the cooperation between the bass, the sound, and the shape and the colors and stuff. But the thing is, those things you have to the experience of going to those nightclubs for about 10 years in London, and seeing people do it, and really believe and feel that into their whole being. I think I still have a lot more paintings to do in that kind of feeling, and it's great that you mention it to me, because I think that one is quite similar to Carnival Dub, but Carnival Dub was done in Italy, so it'll be much brighter, as opposed to that one was done in London, in Colveston, in a basement. But it's interesting, these paintings, when I think about them, I've made them. Colveston is very low ceiling, like 7 feet. And the light must have been horrible. But it's incredible the stuff you can do in really bad situations, in terms of the illumination and the space. Because it has to come from you in the end. The space doesn't matter so much. It comes from within. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me about that one. That one is similar to All Hands on Deck as well. It's very broken up. I love that, because that's when the music, the sound, and the movement of the body is coming together better.
I think the idea of it having to come within it in bad situations is a really good and positive note on which to end the conversation.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful feeling about Cornwall. Cornwall helps me to do that more, I think. You go within yourself to dig it out, because it's all there within us all. It's just a matter of giving ourselves the time to find it. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we should probably end it there. And just before we do, I'd just like to say thanks so much to our exhibition partner, Nottingham Contemporary, and to Stephen Friedman Gallery for their support. Thanks also to my colleagues at Spike Island who've made this event possible, Olivia Jones and Tendai Mutambu. And extra special thanks to our speakers this evening, Eddie Chambers and Denzel Forrester, for your very generous contributions, and to Denzel in particular for your really outstanding exhibition, which of course we're very sad not to be able to share more widely with people in the flesh right now, but we do hope to reopen soon. And a reminder that you can view video documentation of the show online, the link to which can be found in the YouTube chat and on our website. As usual, we welcome your donations. One of my colleagues will be posting a link as to how you can support us in the chat. And thanks so much for joining us. Thanks again to Eddie and Denzel, and until next time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye, Eddie.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Thanks, Lou. Bye-bye.